I'm back in baby's arms. Do you guys know that Patsy Cline song? Anyway, I'm back in my chair, and guess what? I haven't I haven't vlogged at all today. And it's 8:40. And guess how much I care? I don't. I think I'm gonna drive around later and do some vlogging. Anyway, do you guys want to see what I have right here? I actually just did a video where I read a very exciting story. Actually, not a story, but you'll see. McDonald's pumpkin pies. Oh my God, sent straight from heaven. I love them so much. Right now, you don't know this, but you are sitting on top. This is how absolutely elegante and very, very refined my channel is. You are right now, come here, baby. He says hello. Say hi to everybody. He goes, I smell a pumpkin pie. I want it. Don't you? Yeah. Right now, the camera is sitting on top of a large McDonald's cup filled with Dr. Pepper. That's what I'm using as my tripod for my camera, so it doesn't rock back and forth. We don't need to be showing everybody my stomach, do we? Don't nobody want to see that. I don't know. If you want to see it, put it in the comment section below. Everybody be like, thumbs down. No, don't thumb down my video. I already have enough people doing that. What are you doing, honey? You're being so sweet. Why are you being so sweet? Come up here and talk to everybody. Say, well, hi, everybody. Pee used to do this voice. It would drive his dad crazy when we would lay in bed. And I would act like Pee was a child star that had like grown up. And he was like this old rich person, right? But he wasn't really that rich anymore, but he thought he was still rich. He thought he had tons of money. He lived in like this real depressing apartment in New York City. He had been like a stage actor. And he would like be in his bed and he'd just like be there like with one of those turbans on his head. And he'd be like, and he had this assistant and her name was Deborah. Do you remember that? And he'd be like, Deborah, grab a pen and paper. I'm gonna write my memoirs. Yes, my memoirs, like from Annie Mae. And then he'd say, Deborah, tell him to hold it down. I want me a good gin and tonic, Deborah. And then Deborah would bring you a good gin and tonic, wouldn't she? He said, He goes, and I like it when they brought the gin separate with the ice, and then I mix it up with that little glass spill thing, and then I like a good lime in my gin and tonic. What kind of gin do you like? He said, I used to like Tanqueray, can't afford it anymore, like that stuff called Free Spirit. Pee loves a good Free Spirit anything. Yeah, you don't drink, do you? He goes, wait the hell you mean I don't drink? I like a good gin and tonic. Do you guys do voices for your dogs? Watch this one. Come here. Come here, honey. Okay, go over there for a second so that I can bring up Boo Radley. Come here. Come here, Boo. Come on. Boo's being so difficult tonight. He doesn't want to ever jump up here. He's like, why do I always have to be in that stupid video, Dad? But let me just tell you about Boo. He's so funny. He like cannot be bothered. So like, this is the voice I used to do for him. His voice is completely different than Pee-Pee's. Can you put your head up so the people can see you, please? Okay. And he's so sweet. He said, what does that smell like? Boo Radley? Do you love Tucker? Is he your brother? I don't care about that dog. That dog don't bother me. Do you love Pee-Pee? I don't like that dog. Do you like our neighbor? Do you think that Kathy's real nice? I don't like that lady. She's a bitch. Do you see what I do all day long? I'm totally crazy. It was so interesting. Somebody commented on my video for my vlog for yesterday. Well, yeah, yesterday. And they were like, you are so rambly and all over the place. Your mind just jumps and jumps and jumps. Yep, creative soul right here. Tangential. That's me. I don't care about those people. Fuck them people. That's what Boo Radley says. He goes, I don't care about them people, but give me one of them pumpkin pies. He goes, I swear I'll just eat a corner of it. You can just give me a little corner of it. I don't eat it. You just want a corner? Yeah, I swear I'll just eat a corner of it. Don't even worry about it. I'll just taste it for you. Make sure it doesn't got no arsenic in it. Do you love Pee-Pee? I told you I don't care about that dog. That dog's an idiot. Oh, my Lord. Dogs are so much fun, aren't they? We're actually getting ready. It's 8:45 on a Friday night. And I've been working all day long since this morning. And so I thought, I'm going to lay down for an hour. My husband is at a friend's house eating dinner. So I think I'm going to lay down for an hour, with the babies. With the babies, that's what we call them, the babies, because they are. All right, so I'll see you guys in just a little while. Hi, I'm back. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. 5 o'clock in the morning. Where you gonna be? Outside on the corner. To the north, to the south, to the east and the west. Y'all remember that song? Oh my God. My kids in treatment back in the day. Love that song. To all my kids I had back in the day in treatment. Holla, holla. They're like 35 now. Anyway, I had such a fun time back in the day working in a treatment facility. I mean, never a dull moment. It was so funny because one of my old patients, you guys might know who I'm talking about, has a YouTube channel. She talks real openly about how the fact that I was her counselor and that I was basically in charge of her life for like a year. So like I had all of the long-term patients typically that were there for like a year or like 18 months that were court-ordered to treatment. And oh my God, it was so funny. And they would just like, oh, God, I miss those days. Having to take girls to go buy tampons. And I was like 26 at the time. I remember when I was growing up and my mom would like, I remember my mom told me the difference between like a tampad and a tampon, and she was like, or like a pad and a tampon, a pad and a pon. The difference between a tampon and a pad. And I was like, why am I ever going to need this to know this, Mom? And she's like, well, someday you'll have a wife or a daughter and you'll need to know this. I'm like, no, really what I needed to know it for was because I ended up working in a treatment facility and most of my patients were girls. I remember one time I had like, so my caseloads were typically 12 kids, and I remember at one point I had 11 girls and 1 boy, and he was like super like innocent minded from like southern Indiana. And this one girl that I had in treatment so she had like ran away from the foster care system and was a stripper and had a sugar daddy and all this kind of stuff. And I remember she had like this OG come in, right, that was like 70 years old, like literally in like a pimp suit and a pimp hat and everything, and she said that it was her uncle. And I don't know how she got him on the visitation list, but anyway, finally, or later, we found out that it was like really her sugar daddy. So anyway, but he was in treatment at the time that she came in, and it was like her very first day in treatment. And so like back in the day, any of my kids that watch my videos are probably laughing their asses off because they totally remember group therapy. But anyway, back in the day, I would always ask like certain questions, like on kids' first days. Like you had to tell your story of how you got there, and then I would ask you like all these questions, and I would say like, you know, if you could only watch one movie for the rest of your life, what would you watch? If you could only listen to one album or band for the rest of your life, who would it be? And like, you know, are you a night person or day person? Cake or cupcakes? I'd ask all these questions, right? So we would get to know you. And I'll never forget, I asked this girl, I was like, and he was sitting right next to her, and I'll never forget, after she said it, he kind of like moved left. I was like, if you could only, I would love to say her name, but I just can't do that, you know, it's a total violation. But anyway, I was like, I really wonder what happened to her. Like some of these kids, you know, it's so interesting. I had this one girl, such a sad story, that I had her when she was like 16, and apparently like somebody snuck her in pot into our program, and I caught her smoking weed and I kicked her out. I didn't remember this story at all. Like when she called me up years later, okay, so that was at 16. She called me up when she was 32 and to get her some help and stuff like that. She ended up dying of a heroin overdose. It broke my heart. It was so sad. I have known more kids that have died of opiate and heroin overdoses than, I mean, I can even tell you. It's just heroin and opiate abuse in our country is, I mean, at an all-time high. It is just, it breaks my heart. And addicted like that quick too, you know? The really interesting thing is, like, kind of like where kids, we like, you can see trends in drugs over time, like where kids came from, like if they were city kids, or if they were like suburban kids, or if they were like country kids and things like that. And back then when I worked in treatment, so I started in 95 and I left in 08, the trends were kind of like this, like country kids in the Midwest were like meth and pills. I mean, always pot and alcohol was always a given. So like we can just like rule those, like if they came into treatment, they smoked pot and they drank. That was just always a given. And maybe they didn't drink, but but they always smoked pot. And, so anyway, you guys are wondering what this girl said, right? Well, I'm gonna get to that in just a second. Oh my God, I wonder what happened to her. So I totally know her name too. And like, what was funny was that her stripper name, like, okay, so I'll tell you that story in a second. But anyway, because it was really sad what happened. And I had her forever, and she ended up leaving real successfully after like a year, and going to live with her aunt and uncle. And I don't know what happened, but anyway. After that, I'm kind of surprised she's not typically all these kids contact me. I still to this day get friend requests on Facebook from kids that I had as patients, and they're like, oh my God, you have no idea, like, you know, what treatment did for me, and blah, 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 and you were so awesome, and whatever. And my attitude had always been, because I had gone through a lot of those programs when I was their age as well, that I just wanted somebody that got on my level, didn't lie to me, and told me the truth, right? And it's interesting because one of the comments I get in my videos a lot is, I would never want you as a life coach. You're so harsh, blah, 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 whatever. I was actually just talking to Charles Gross about this today, and listen, in my practice, and anybody that has worked with me will tell you this, I walk a real fine line between compassion and confrontation, because I don't believe in coddling people. I don't believe that helps them in growing. I believe in being honest with somebody and then being there to catch them when they fall. That's totally what I believe, right? But to sit there and coddle somebody and say, it's gonna be okay, you're gonna get through this, it's gonna be okay, like, that's bullshit, right? Sometimes people just need to hear, it's not gonna be okay, and now we need to figure out what we're gonna do to get you through this, because you can't just continue to live in your head and be like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. Like, that's, to me, not helping anybody. So anyway, I think that one of the things the kids appreciated about me back in the day is that I didn't bullshit them, you know? I just told them, like, look, if you go home and you hang out with the same people, because my counselor told me that, my last counselor that I had after 5 treatments, she told me that, because if you go back and do the same thing you were doing before, hanging out with the same people, you need to change your people, places, and things. If you continue to do the same thing, you're going to end up using and you're going to end up dead. And she was absolutely right. So anyway, and I had this wake-up call. I was like, okay, Peter, every other time that you've done treatment and every other time you've tried to stay sober through a 12-step program, you haven't been willing to change your friends. You haven't been willing to, like, stop going out to the same bars and the same places. You got to do something different. And so I was like, fine, I'm doing it different this time because my life is more important. And I didn't talk much about this in my addiction and recovery video, but one of the things that I really believe is that when I got sober, I was like, if I'm going to stay sober, I'm going to use my sobriety as a medium to have this, like, amazing life. Like, and I used to joke and say, like, I'm not going to be sitting in a meeting 20 years from now, haha. And, you know, like, so anyway, look at me today, I still am. But anyway, so, I think, like, oh, what was I going to say? So we're talking about that girl. Okay, so anyway, this girl in treatment. Oh, I was talking about the opiate and the heroin use thing. So then we would have, like, kids from different, like, areas, right? And so, like, suburban kids were always, like, a lot of weed and marijuana and pills. Like, pills have always just been a mainstay, but it kind of depended on the pills. The other thing is, like, county kids, like country kids, would call pills, like, they would define them by, like, nerve pills, and what was the other one? Pain pills and nerve pills. And you always, like, you never take a pill, you eat a pill, right? That's what addicts say. If you're an addict, you know that. We don't say, oh, I need to take 2 Oxycontin. We say, I'm going to eat Crush and eat Oxy. But anyway, or Gum It or Numb It. But anyway, so country kids were like meth and pills, okay? And then suburban kids were like cocaine, pills, but it was usually like Xanax or Adderall, and then like, what else? And then like inner city kids at the time that I worked in there was like phasing out of crack cocaine. Like crack cocaine was like not such a big deal, like inner city kids, but like huge amounts of marijuana, lots of drinking. And what's interesting is if you could have predicted back then, and I remember going to seminars where people would talk about like heroin and opiate use, because I was one of the first counselors that ever worked with buprenorphine, which is Suboxone. And I'm sure a lot of you out there know what Suboxone is, and it's a maintenance drug. And the way that it was designed was for long-term opiate addicts that didn't know how. You guys are like, this is a completely different Peter. Absolutely, baby. But Suboxone was actually designed as a maintenance drug, kind of like Vivitrol, which is the shots typically, so that it reduces cravings, and it's a maintenance drug. So you drop somebody's levels, and then they are on Suboxone, and then you maintain them for a long time while they're working a 12-step program and have counseling. But what happened over time was that opiate addicts realized that they could manipulate Suboxone. So what they could do is they could shoot dope or eat pills on the weekends, and then Monday through Thursday they could use Suboxone so they could work and still be high, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday they would use dope or shoot or use pills. Does that make sense? So I'm not a real big believer in Suboxone today. I don't think it works for I've only had a few people that it's really been successful for. But anyway, back then, it was interesting because we would talk about like opiate use and heroin use and things like that. And it was always like everybody would say it's going to come into the country. It's going to come into like the country cities, right? Like the factory towns. Because what's typical is that like in these country cities, they have factory towns like Chrysler and like, Nabisco and places like that. And so people start working there when they're 18 years old. So by the time that they're 30 and their kids are in high school, they have a shit ton of money. They're making $100 grand a year. They, all this kind of stuff. They own their house, they own their trucks. And so it's like all their money just goes to partying and all this kind of stuff. And so you would get these kids in there that are from these country towns, but really their parents who were like 30, 35 were making $250,000 a year and owned their houses and all their cars and everything outright. So what else is there to do in a small town? Drugs. It's sad. And that's really like where like you would see this mass drug use from these kids. And so we would get these kids that just like were absolutely adorable and drove like $50,000 pickup trucks and wore the nicest clothes and just were absolute drug addicts. And it was the saddest thing in the entire world. But nobody ever guessed at the time that opiate use and heroin use was going to totally just infect the suburban areas. And what ended up happening, and I can remember at that time sitting there and I thought, listen, the suburban areas, not these country towns, are going to be where it's going to be easiest to get opiates and heroin because they're the border to the inner city, and it's going to be easy to get heroin and opiates in there. And then those are the people that are going to like hands-on have the most money, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. And now in Indianapolis, and I don't know what it's like in other cities, but in Indianapolis, typically when a kid overdoses from heroin, they go to a private school. I mean, it is so sad. It is like the big money kids in Indianapolis are the ones that are dying of heroin, and their families are kind of just totally oblivious to it. It's interesting, like through the years, it's like the parents that I worked with who like seemed to have had tougher lives were the ones that were easier to work with because they were willing to do anything for their kids. Like I remember one time I had this mother that lived in southern Indiana, and her drive to come see us was like a 3.5 hour drive, and she was there every Thursday for family group. Like, and our family group started at 6 and ended at 10, and she would be there every Thursday for family group and every Saturday for family group. I mean, she drove back and forth those 6 hours every week. But then I would see these kids that their parents had like, a lot of money, and they just were kind of like, what they would want to do is take them to 5 psychiatrists to diagnose them with, ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder, all this kind of stuff, when really their kid was a drug addict. And they never wanted to admit that their kid was a drug addict, so they would just take them to all these psychiatrists and have them diagnosed with all this shit, when the reality was they needed to be in long-term residential treatment, removed from their environment, have good counseling, and enter a 12-step program. But their parents were totally like unwilling to do that. And what I actually found out over time was that a lot of these parents had their own drug and alcohol problems. That was one of the things that at where I worked, it was not always popular, but because I had gone through it because of my mother's alcohol abuse. My mother was an alcoholic. She got sober 6 months after I did. I would go into these outpatient programs when I was in high school and stuff like that, and my mom would like come home from these programs and she would like drink and like totally acted like she didn't have a problem, and I'm like, oh my god, my mom's an alcoholic too. And it would piss me off because I'd say that to the counselors, and the counselors would be like, well, we're here to talk about you, not your mom, right? So when I had kids that came to me and they'd be like, my mom shoots dope, or my mom smokes pot, or my dad drinks, or whatever, I would straight up address it. I would be like in family group and I'd be like, well, Johnny said that you smoke weed too, and their dads would be like, well, I mean every once in a while. And I'd say, well, Johnny says that you smoke a lot of weed all day long. And then they'd finally get honest, and I'd be like, if you want Johnny to come home and be successful, you've got to work on your addiction issues too. And it was really cool through time to see so many families get sober together. I absolutely loved it. But I miss those days so much. Never a dull moment. I swear it was never a dull moment. I loved those kids. I loved working with the families. People ask me why I left treatment. It wasn't really anything to do with the families. It was that treatment programs are changing. They're getting more political. Not just the one that I worked at. I mean, I still send people there. It's an amazing program. But just treatment programs in general are changing. You don't get as long a stays as you used to get back in the day, and you know, I really am a believer that you need a minimum of a 30-day treatment program to go really through the phases of like detox, resistance, acceptance, and change, and then fear. Because I think for me, right before I got out of treatment, I was like right between ready to go and total fear. And I'll never forget, I told my counselor that, and she said, "You're ready to go." She's like, "You've done everything that you can do. You know, if you're scared, that means that you have to go test the waters." And it was so true. I think I would have done really well in like a 9-month program, but that's not what I did the last time. So I don't know, it's so much fun working in treatment back in those days and getting to know those kids and their families, and I miss them. I miss working with those families, you know, and getting to know the ins and outs and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, teenagers are just such a life source. They really are. And I don't really think that we take them as seriously as we should. You know, I always have said this, and I put this actually in my book, that like, I remember one of the things that parents used to always say to me is, they think they're in love, but they're not really in love. And I'm like, baby, listen, love at 15 feels the same as love at 50, you know? And the other thing is, I think a lot about these kids that ended up dying before they were over 18 of, you know, an overdose. And so like, we so like look at teenagers and their lives and their choices and their falling in love and their seriousness and their laughter, and it's like we don't take that serious, but we don't know how long their lives are going to be. You know, their life might end at 18, my life might end, you know, tomorrow. And so it's like, in the course of my life compared to the course of their life, have I loved, have I lived, all those things, you know? And so like, I always took them very, very seriously. I loved working with teenagers so much. I just loved it. I still love it to this day. When I work with teenagers, they're just so much fun, and that light that they have in their eyes, you know, and they get so excited about stuff, just music or drawing or being the idea that they can still be like a famous artist or whatever. It's just, I love that so much, you know. Like, I've never lost that teenager feeling of like, you know, you can restart your life anytime you want and reinvent yourself. I've never lost that, and I love that about teenagers. But back to the girl, let me just tell you, because this is where the whole thing started. So I'll never forget, I looked at her and I said, so there is this boy sitting right next. I can totally see him in my head too. And I was like, "So what's your favorite movie of all time?" And she goes, Big Black Dicks 4. Oh my God, she was so honest. I'll never forget, all the kids had to take out their piercings when she came in, and this girl, I have to just say it how it is, I'm sorry, she had her clit pierced, and the nurse was like, we had this really bitter ass nurse, and the nurse was like, "You have to take that out." And she goes, "No, I'm not." She goes, "You have to take that out." She goes, "Do you know how much pain it was putting that in?" She goes, "If you want it, come and get it." And the nurse was like, "Well, we'll just let you keep that in there then." Oh my God, I should write a book. I loved it so much. I loved it so much. Maybe I'll go back and get a job in treatment and stop this whole yoo-hoo, I'm a yoo-hoo star. Maybe I'll go back and work in treatment and stop all this. I am like stumbling over my words. Maybe I will go back and work in treatment and stop all this YouTube madness, drama. I don't know. Probably not, but I do miss it. I think when you, like, this is the one thing, is like, when you work somewhere for 40 or 50 hours a week, like, you have to fall in love with your job, because if you don't, no matter what you do, whether you work at McDonald's or you're a stockbroker or you're a physician or you work in a treatment program or whatever, you're giving 50 hours of your life to that place. You're there more than you are with your family, right? So if you don't love what you're doing, change your job, go in, find something else. Don't quit your job before you find something else, but find something else that you want to do. I just crossed over railroad tracks. Railroad tracks always spook me out. Anyway, I don't know why. I always think there's like a murder or a kidnapping happening. But anyway, here's another one. But if you hate your job and you don't even want to go in there anymore, figure out what you want to do that you love. It doesn't have to be a career. Just like if you love music, go find a music store and go start working there. But don't give 50 hours a week to a place that you can't stand. I loved working in treatment. I don't regret not one bit of that 13 years. It was the best 13 years of my entire life. Anyway, there's my little treatment story for the night. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Talk to you later. I just have to tell you guys the weirdest thing that just happened. So, I like pulled into this gas station to get a fountain Coke, and I was like thinking about, I literally just filmed the part that where I was talking about that girl in treatment, and like this girl and I can't even tell you how close we got. I mean, she was in treatment from 16 to 18, probably 16 and a half to 18. And when I haven't heard from kids for a long time, or like I have no idea, like if I look them up and I don't know what's happened to them, I sometimes, like if I Google their name and I can't find their name, like I look their name up and then I put obituary in, and like she passed away last November of like an overdose, and she had kids, and I get so many messages from people, and in fact, I've been going back and forth with this girl on Twitter about her sister, and she knows who she is if she's watching my videos. Her sister getting help and becoming a ward of the state and needing treatment, and God bless this girl. I hope this girl gets the help that she needs. If you are out there, I'm just like heartbroken right now. You know, it's like, it's so weird to think like, this girl was a patient of mine 10 years ago, and all of that time since she's left, she's, you know, it's just, I am not somebody that hates addiction, because addiction saved my life. Had I not gone through everything that I went through addiction-wise, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I wouldn't have met the people that I met today. If I hadn't been sober, I would never have met my husband. I would never have met my best friend, who I met through sobriety. But at the same time, it's such a devastating disease that people sometimes, I don't think, take seriously or don't know what to do with. If you're somebody that's out there and you are struggling with addiction issues or substance abuse issues, or you think that you might, or you have a family member or a friend that is, do not wait. Just don't. Find a 12-step program in your area. You know, call a 12-step program in your area. They're listed in the phone book. You know, the city organization, the offices are listed in the phone book. Find a treatment program. If you don't have the money for one, Salvation Army always has low-cost treatment. There's typically always a Salvation Army treatment program in every state in the United States. You know, if you have the option to pay for treatment, go to your doctor, do whatever you have to do, get help. If you're a family member or a friend that is struggling with a family member that is resistant to getting help, go to Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for friends and family members of alcoholics and addicts. Do something. Do not wait. It is so, so serious. Breaks my heart. I see that girl standing in the hallway, just laughing. It's how I see her. And to think that that's a life cut short. She was 27 years old and she had a son, and I think a life cut short by addiction. I'm so grateful, and I feel so blessed that I'm sober today, and that I know so many people that are, and it's truly, truly a gift. It is just truly a gift.